gonna go around with the most surprising thing and gonna do the group thing and then the second one, okay? Most surprising thing today.
I think the fact that there was so much common ground between the panels was the surprise, and then I'm gonna come back and answer what that was. What do you want to do now?
Okay, well you can, if that's already tackling question number 2, then we'll come back for that in the section.
Okay.
Okay, Bryce.
So for Final Jeopardy, I think that the best way to do this is to phrase it as a question, which is why invariantly across all of the talks, the points of contention were entirely non-technical. I don't think I really saw any technical disagreements going on. I saw exclusively ones that were in effect political, and I don't know why that is.
They said the technical ones are easy, which I think is sort of right, and it actually plays into mine, which is I think I was surprised at how often I was surprised at an absence, is probably the best way of putting this. I was surprised at the absence of interesting theories about how groups would adopt a technology in almost all sessions except for the crypto session. And so I think because maybe crypto is core to to game theory, is like endogenous to the technology, means that as a core part of its mission, the crypto community has to actually think about this. But I think in order for us to have wise futures, we really need to be creative about how we think through how people are actually adopting these things.
I wasn't in sessions today, so I'm going to answer with a story about yesterday. And I was surprised by the discussion and debate about the experience of the current younger generation of hackers trying to shape the future of the internet. Surprised by the positions on all sides, and I thought it was really provocative and interesting. My generation had a pretty clear articulation of our utopian visions, and there's still work to be done, I think, for the current moment to figure out what the master blueprint we're all trying to build to is.
Then, question number 2. What were some interesting interdependencies amongst Trek, either in the way that strategies seem to contradict each other or that they seem to accelerate each other? Are there any promising ways of joining forces? Who'd like to go first?
So the common ground across all the different panels was, there are 3. One is the importance of communication. The second was having these really, successes and big goals. And the third, which is embedded in the format of the event here, which is to be action-oriented or to actually act. And the reason these things are common across all 3 is because they are nearly impossible to do. Communication is nearly impossible. It's very hard to maintain high aims, and it's very hard to act. And there's one constituency that does this very well. It's kids, right? Under 12, kids are very good at listening and sensing and seeing the world, learning languages, learning skills. After 12, once you hit puberty, all that stuff disappears. And you have this lag period for 80 years. Very hard to aim high. When you're a kid, you don't call it aiming high, you dream. And then we start lowering our aims after 12. And then the third thing is, kids are just doers and adults are talkers. So the reason these things are embedded into all of our panels is because it's nearly impossible. So the action item, all of this, we'll talk about next. Yeah.
I think just to build on what you said, I think that I'm noticing a very strong divergence in the population here about what things people have learned helplessness about. So there's a convergence around the general way that the world seems to be moving, with the way that technology is increasing and the way that social life is decohering. But there's a strong divergence between people who feel like they have a learned helplessness around the ability to shape technology and people who feel like they have a learned helplessness around the ability to wield power. And those 2 demographics seem to be largely incapable of finding common ground here, even though they're seeing a very similar world.
I need to think about that. I like that one. So for me, one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I talked about this morning in the neuroscience panel, is basically how, especially in the neuroscience panel, I think us getting that utopian vision right really depends on a lot of other utopian things working properly in computer security, in wealth redistribution, in a bunch of other things. While I think that's true in general, the interrelationship I think I really want to talk about begins here, and it's the temporal one. And there's two naive theories of the future, right? We can say exactly when something will happen, and we can get around these multipolar traps, we can delay the future or stop progress until the time is just right. And then there's the opposite one, which is it's just happening, so let's do it, right? And both of these are like nuanced views of how we move into these futures that, to your point, are happening and are coming. And so I think it's really important that we sequence these right, and we apply like slowness to the extent that it's possible, and then we dive in very quickly on problems that we actually just need to go through and find the other side of.
So I'm going to start with potential areas of conflict. So the modern internet and the modern public sphere is sort of a carnival of mayhem. We have all these trolls, all these sock puppets, all these intelligence agencies, all these machine learning algorithms shaping those conversations in completely novel ways. And so I think one of the potential areas of conflict that we see is between freedom of speech and the creation of a healthy, functioning, modern public square. And so I think if that contradiction is deep, then we're kind of in trouble, and we're going to have to try really hard to work out what to do about it. My optimistic side is there is some way of unifying these things and building a healthy public square on top of that mayhem, or around that mayhem, or in spite of that mayhem. And if we win at that, then I think that's going to put us in good stead. The other place that I think there's really good opportunity for synthesis and synergy is on computer security. I think, there's a kind of future where we figure out how to get secure devices into everyone's hands, and that's a categorically way better future than the ones where things continue to be hackable at random moments and in unexpected ways.
Nice. Final question, the really hard one. What are things that you think this community could do in the next year? You can also personally commit to something, but what are some action items that you can throw out here, like really actionable items? And please think about the same question. What would you already like to commit to?
So I just want to jump off Peter's, because my action item is may be unpopular or not particularly grand, but it really is to adopt the futurist toolkit for looking at those implications, taking certain variables like abundance, like individual autonomy versus authority, and modifying them on some sort of landscape, and then re-envisioning where you end up on some of these things, on computer security and hackability, and then having a pretty finely tuned set of questions about, do we actually agree that if we can't solve the hacking problem, we should delay on the neural implant problem, or like I think some of those sequencing things and some of the interaction between tech and society is somewhat tractable, and it's not just some sort of roundtable dinner discussion that we're going to get lost in for 20 years. The action is, I think we need to resist the temptation to just have these high-level conversations and really have the nuanced implication conversations at a place where we can do that on paper, and we can actually work out where we agree and disagree in the micro of the social interaction.
Do you have any specific topics that you'd like this?
I'll share an anecdote about that. A few years ago, Anders and I wrote a paper on brain emulation risks where we really tried to do this. We tried to sequence out if the technology is open or proprietary, and if the computers are secure or not secure, and if the component technologies are developed in certain orders, can we say anything about the types of scenario that leads to? The thing I would say about that methodology is that it's at the very limit of what felt plausible with futurology. It felt like you could get maybe some chance that you were making correct predictions about what policy levers you should pull now, but it was hard to get high confidence from at least one paper's worth of that work. Maybe with sustained attention to certain specific questions, you could do better.
All right. Well, if we want to draw up a topic list and actually do those meetings, I'm all game. Sure. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have something possibly weird to say, which is that I think that all of you should be being more nepotistic. Actually, I think
what?
more nepotistic. People should be doing more nepotism. They should be hiring more of their friends and fewer randos that they don't trust. And they should be like trying to coordinate with people that are actually in their lives rather than, trying to assume that there's a mass of people out there and that abstract mass is the thing to coordinate with. I think that's the most concrete advice I could give to anybody.
I think you should be friends with everyone, man.
But I'm definitely not. I really don't like most people. And I don't want them to know who I am or spend any time with me.
You're fired. I'd go to Burning Man. That'd be my recommendation for the year. And the reason for that is I think we're our own worst enemy in two regards. I think the problems are easier than we realize. And if we could just think again like we could when we are super young, I think we'll find that cancer is straightforward, longevity is straightforward. I think it's going to be... So get in that state of mind you could use, and if we can get psychedelics to do it, maybe that'll help too. And the second reason to go to Burning Man is kind of a synthesis of the comments that were just made over the last 10 minutes, and it's in regard to disagreement. Disagreement and parallax, which is the idea, is a feature of evolution. Nature doesn't want you to get into consensus. Consensus is very dangerous. Oracles are dangerous. And that's why there's a social evolutionary genetic process that will fragment you as soon as you get into consensus. Right after world peace, the Civil War, balkanization. That's why we divide into male and female. Because when you get a second point of view is when innovation happens, when greatness happens. The key thing is you got to have respect. When there's no respect, just like there's happening in politics now, the parallax feels awful. When there is respect, like in a marriage, the fact that you got a second look is absolutely unbelievable, whether it's a partner. And that's why nature gave us two of everything. That's why two things ended up in the ark, because that second look was an enormous, powerful universe. Just think about the fact that there's male and female in everything. So and in your own mind, be able to hold both thoughts, even in your own head. Let those two ideas compete among themselves.
Neat. Okay. Anything, commitments, action items for the next year?
I will not be going to Burning Man. I really don't think you should go either.
What should you do instead?
Do all of the things you would do at Burning Man, except where you actually live. And, because they might last that way.
So to the third question, what is a commitment that I can do personally, and what is something that perhaps our extended community could work on as well? Again, it might be unpopular, but I genuinely believe we would learn a lot, developing the practice of asking ourselves tougher questions, like really much less glamorous questions. Are we developing these shiny, fascinating technology bits to solve our own needs for significance and validation? Because I know I'm guilty of that personally, and I think we as a community are guilty of that in many circumstances, not all, but many. Or are we pursuing solutions to practical problems in service of others? Are we trying to make the world a better place, or are we trying to scratch our own itch? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but are we aware of which of those two paths we're going down? I think that self-awareness will help us grow as a community and grow as a species to really achieve that utopia that I think we all really want.
Yes. Okay, I'll come to you after.
I think one of my commitments, and I have been doing this for a while, is talk to people that is not related to anybody of us here. I think we're keeping this information like silos of information, and a lot of people out there don't even understand what we're talking about, and we need everybody on board. So I think we need to communicate better science and not say, I'm a scientist because I am, so I'm smarter than you. No, as a scientist, I had to learn how to communicate so we can actually have communication.
So my commitment, and what I've been doing for a decade or so, is trying to break down borders of all levels, psychological, informational, technological, whatever it is. I think one of the biggest challenge for us as a humanity and a species is that we have borders, and not just physical, not just keeping it confined to physical. It's just borders that we have on Earth, and that's one of the biggest challenges. I'm committed to breaking the borders.
Back in the old cypherpunk days, one of our ideological statements was, cypherpunks write code. So my commitment is to continue to write code to make the world a better place.
Okay, my commitment is to begin to learn how to act like a 12-year-old, and as my first action towards that, I'd like to ask Joon how he thinks people can manage to act like 12-year-olds.
Number one, be with people that are seers, that behave that way, because that'll be infectious. Number two is to do improv. So I'm just blown away what a resource improv is and how few people have done it. You can go to Hamilton for $1,000. You can go to Bath's Improv for $10. So improv is getting back into listening, the shared control, decentralized power. All the things we're talking about is embedded into the ethos of improv. So I think that's a good way to get back in the kid state of mind. And the third way to do is to go to Burning Man.
Bats is great, by the way. I've been involved with him for years.
I was going to jump in. First of all, I'm not going to commit either way to going to Burning Man or not at this point. But I do have a commitment that's relevant to this group, which is I commit to build, at the Partnership on AI, we're going to be building a research organization in the next year to really try and tackle some of the hard technology shaping questions around AI. And so my commitment to this group and my offer to this group is both we're going to be hiring for good machine learning people who are interested in policy and ethics, and vice versa, social scientists and humanities people who are interested in AI. So we're open to hiring, and then also, especially as we spin up stuff, open to collaboration with the many excellent organizations in this room and our membership more broadly to try and tackle at least some of the hard issues we flagged in the AI space.
Neat. Okay. So with that being said, Alice, you had a point? Okay, your commitment.
So I just felt very inspired by this space. One concern I have with many of our organizations is that we have bad institutional memory. And that's something we should all work hard on improving so that we actually have a cumulative growth of knowledge. Another thing that's been an itch that I want to scratch is that about 10 years ago we did a roadmap on brain emulation, and it's about time that we actually do an update. So I'm committing to try to set together a proper meeting to do an update for kind of 2019 year version of brain emulation.
I'm going to commit to improve the information on the internet in time for the next election. And try to unleash AIs on the collective works in the Internet Archive to help people get an idea of what's going on in our media landscape in a macroscopic way. Need help?
I've noticed that there is a lot of homogeneity in this group, as diverse and thoughtful as you all are, and shout outs to especially the folks of color in the room. So one of my commitments is to bring more people into the Foresight conversation, that being in the form of sponsoring another person's membership. I challenge you to sponsor someone else's membership, particularly someone who isn't usually invited into these conversations. And I challenge us as a community to bring some of this long-term thinking, to pair it with really, really near-term thinking, and to think of organizations, whether they be local or worldwide, who are doing really, really near-term work to improve people who are existentially threatened in the present, so that they can be involved in these conversations about the far future.
Thank you so much for guiding the conversations here. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Applause to our synthesis.